What's your crazy father-in-law story?
To put things mildly, my husband's relationship with his stepfather is strained. My father-in-law is what you might consider to have some narcissistic tendencies. From afar, he can come off as charming and gregarious, even generous. But behind closed doors, he can be menacing and manipulative, and he seems to have always had it out for my husband since my mother-in-law married him when my husband was 14. To make a long story short, my husband essentially went and lived at a boarding school to escape his stepfather, didn't speak to him for 2 years, and was essentially on his own from his teens onward. He did go to live with them for a few years when he moved back to the UK, and my husband tells stories of being verbally abused by his stepfather, who would rant and rave at him and demand sums of money from him. He also did a lot of things to make him as uncomfortable as possible in his house, and even admitted to doing it on a few occasions. For example, my husband worked security at nights, and his stepfather refused to move his personal computer out of my husband's bedroom and would go in there all day and type loudly so my husband could not sleep. Anyway, many years ago, after my husband and I had gotten married, we were going to be moving back to London. However, my husband was finishing his training in Oxford and would not be able to join me for a few months. My in-laws invited me to stay with them. I was initially worried, given my husband's experience with his stepfather, but I had never had an issue with him, and he had always actually been nice to me and seemed excited to have me, so I didn't think much of it. But when I arrived, it quickly became weird. For example, I was barred from working on the computer in the living room while they were watching TV, but I was full-time trying to apply for jobs and find a flat, so I started sitting upstairs to work on my computer. But my father-in-law didn't like this and accused me of avoiding them, so now I was required to sit with them in the living room if they were in the living room. It was okay, because it gave me time to have nice conversations with my mother-in-law in the evenings. But my father-in-law let me know privately that he didn't appreciate this, and if I wanted to be around in the evenings, to not disturb him with my conversations with my mother-in-law. So I was allowed to sit there, silently, not working on my computer, and not talking. Weirdest of all is that I initially wasn't allowed to keep my own food in the house. There are some dietary restrictions in the house, and my in-laws thought I couldn't follow them. Even when I was allowed to keep my own food, I wasn't allowed to cook if they were cooking, or might cook soon. This wasn't a stated rule, that's just sort of what it turned into. My in-laws had 2 younger children, and my stepfather would make dinner for them before my mother-in-law got home, but he mostly did not invite me to eat with them. My mother-in-law would get home a couple hours later and make a meal for herself or heat up leftovers from the meal my father-in-law cooked. My father-in-law worked a lot from home, so he was there a lot of the time. So I would try to make myself dinner earlier to avoid his cooking time, but my father-in-law thought that would conflict with him cooking dinner at 5 p.m. It didn't seem like there was an early or late enough time for me to make food. After he was done cooking, he wouldn't clean up, and I wasn't allowed to touch the food or clean it up because my mother-in-law might want it, so I couldn't make anything for myself then. Basically, I could only make myself food when he wasn't around, or if I was cooking for all of them, which I did a few times. Evenings became fraught. I'd get really hungry, so I took to going out to grab cheap food at the local chip shop, so I wouldn't be at home to interfere and awkwardly not be invited to meals. In my mother-in-law's defense, I think she thought I was being fed by my father-in-law and had no idea all these weird restrictions on my access to food and the kitchen existed. And if my mother-in-law was home, I was typically always invited to meals. So weekdays were much less of an issue than weekday evenings. Anyway, one day I was home, hard at work applying for jobs, and I could smell these wonderful food smells coming from the kitchen. My father-in-law was cooking something that smelled delicious for my brother and sister-in-law who were, at this time, like 8 and 6 years old respectively. And in a strange twist of luck, my mother-in-law had managed to get off work early and shown up as a surprise to have dinner with the whole family. I'm sitting up in my room, plotting where I might go to get a cheap meal of my own as the food smells were really making my stomach growl, and I figured I wouldn't be invited. But then I heard my mother-in-law call up the stairs that dinner was ready and would I please join them. I was ecstatic. I was being invited to dinner, and I was going to get to eat whatever that great-smelling food was. I got downstairs and I was thrilled. They had made grilled veggies with potatoes and these delicious-looking sausages. My mother-in-law cheerfully asked me, "What kind of sausages would you like? The meaty sausages or the vegetarian sausages?" I looked at the vegetarian sausages. My mother-in-law is vegetarian, and they were not appetizing looking. They were all shriveled and kinda gray looking, and the meat sausages looked so good. "I'll have meat sausages, please." I was so excited. My mother-in-law was about to give me a sausage when my father-in-law stopped her. And now, you need to imagine him talking with your best Cockneyish accent. "Oi, she can't have those sausages. The meat sausages are for the kids." Mother-in-law: "Surely she can have at least one." Father-in-law: "I made those for the kids, and she can't have one." Me: "I'll just eat one." There was a plate of at least 8 sausages, and I felt like there was plenty to go around. Father-in-law: "But what if the kids want seconds?" So it was decided that I would eat the veggie sausages. But at least it was food that I didn't have to buy from the chip shop and eat on a park bench on the street. So I accepted my fate. That veggie sausage was the worst veggie sausage I have ever had. It was somehow both soggy and dry. It made this squeaky noise as I ate it, but I was hungry, so whatever. I should note that my 8 and 6-year-old brother and sister-in-law were the pickiest eaters I have ever seen. I had up until that point never seen my brother-in-law eat anything other than potatoes, bread, and cheddar. My sister-in-law, I think, primarily existed on white carbs and candy. I looked over at their plates, and they had eaten the potatoes, but the sausages sat there untouched. My father-in-law noticed that the kids weren't eating their sausages and piped up. Father-in-law: "Kids, you better eat those sausages." Brother-in-law: "I don't like them." Sister-in-law: "You know we hate sausages, Papa." An argument ensued with my father-in-law yelling at my brother and sister-in-law to finish their sausages, but they refused. And I'm starting to get excited. Maybe this means I can have the sausages. But then my father-in-law stands up in a huff and shouts, "What a shame. She," meaning me, "could have had those." He went over, grabbed their plates, and tossed them and all the other leftover meat sausages in the trash. I didn't stay much longer after that, and eventually my husband and I left the UK in total. This incident was maybe nearly 10 years ago. Edit. Given the distance between us geographically, we luckily haven't needed to engage much or rely much on my in-laws over the last 10 years, and I'd say that my husband's relationship with his mother has improved since then. Basically what the title says. Husband and I were living on our own, working full-time jobs and adulting just fine until we conceive, as planned. Well, my body didn't handle pregnancy too well, and I was constantly sick, in and out of the hospital. My employer said I could take leave and come back when I was able to work my full shifts again. Pretty darn cool of him. Anywho, our truck starts messing up, big time. And with me not working, we didn't have the funds to fix it. We had no contact with husband's horrible father because whilst we were staying there and he found out we were moving out on our own, he started becoming violent and hostile towards us. He would walk by me and call me names. Stupid bee, ducking whore, dumbass bee. Every single time he passed me, he said something. He also called husband into his bedroom nightly to scold him and insult him, calling him a P-word and a effing idiot, so on and so forth. So we leave the next day whilst he's at work. He comes home to us gone and is furious, blowing up my husband's phone, calling everyone in the family and telling them I have taken his son, LOL. Okay, psycho. Well, back to the point of the story. Like I said, I was sick all the time and the truck just crapped out on us. Now this is a 1992 Chevy 1500, and it was booted up and with engine trouble. It clearly wasn't worth much. So a man my husband worked with offered to take it off our hands for $3,500. Great deal considering it was pretty crapped out. Only problem? JNFIL. Even after husband turned 18, never transferred the title to husband's name, even though it was his truck. So we inform just no FIL, we need the title and are selling the truck. He throws a fit and says no we aren't. Then refuses to transfer the title and comes and tows the truck, technically stealing it from his son. His intentions were to screw us over financially in hopes it would make his son leave me, whilst pregnant, and move back in with him. Now he succeeded in screwing us over financially, but that just made his son despise him even more, and as the years have passed, he just continues to make his son hate him. Here we are nearly 5 years later, and we have been no contact for over a year, and we plan to keep it that way. Oh yeah, and after he stole the truck, he tried to give it to his youngest daughter as a graduation present. It was given to husband as an 18th birthday/graduation present. 5 weeks ago, I gave birth to our dear husband's and I first child. We had made it very clear early on that only dear husband and I would be in the delivery room, and we would inform our families once baby was born and we were ready for visitors. So I go into labor at 4 a.m. We go to the hospital, get checked, admitted, and schedule an epidural. Once I get the epidural, my dear husband sends a mass text to our family saying I am in labor, just got an epidural, and we are going to get some rest since we have been up for over 24 hours and we're exhausted. Seems pretty straightforward, and if it had gone down like that, I wouldn't be posting here. Just after my dear husband sent the text, my father-in-law responds with, "Okay, I'll be there soon." No. Dear husband tells him not to come up, we are going to be sleeping. Nothing is happening yet, baby isn't here. Dear husband is handling all communication, so I don't know if father-in-law responded or not. I was exhausted and tried to sleep. Keyword is tried. Just as I'm falling asleep, who should walk in but father-in-law, happily chatting like nothing is wrong. He just won't shut up. I'm too exhausted to say anything, and looking back, I really wish either dear husband had forced him out or I had gotten the nurses to make him leave. Every time I start to drift off, he brings up something else to talk about, keeping both dear husband and I awake. Eventually, dear husband takes father-in-law out to get breakfast, hoping to get him to leave and let me get some sleep. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, as the hospital decided to test fire alarms during this time. Dear husband returned with father-in-law in tow, still chatting up a storm, and father-in-law parks himself on the couch in my room, stretches out, and decides to take a nap himself, leaving dear husband to try and sleep in a wooden rocking chair. Needless to say, he didn't get any sleep. Eventually, father-in-law goes into the waiting room to watch TV, as the only controller in my room was attached to my bed, and while he's gone, I give birth to our beautiful daughter. Father-in-law hears her crying and is standing just outside the curtain of my room and asks if he can come in and see her. I was still spread and being stitched up, and if he had walked in, he would have seen a lot more of me that he doesn't need to be seeing. Thankfully, dear husband was standing near the door and told him no, he had to wait. Father-in-law stays out long enough for me to get presentable and start feeding daughter. Then comes in, takes daughter from me, and holds her before dear husband even had a chance to do so. Dear husband made a comment about this, but father-in-law ignored it completely. I don't have a shiny spine and didn't say anything the whole time he was there, but was fuming that he couldn't even allow us to have this time to ourselves. He did the same thing when sister-in-law had her son, so dear husband and I agreed not to tell anyone when I was in labor, but dear husband was too excited to keep it to himself. Background: I'm 28, female. Partner is 29, male. His grandpa is genuinely a crappy person, but my partner loves him for some reason. This man is old, rude, and thinks it's hilarious to upset people, his own family mostly, on purpose. His wife, boyfriend's grandma, cannot stand him, and everyone else just ignores/enables him. On to last night. We are at his uncle's house for Thanksgiving, and everything is going fine. Sitting on the couch, drinking a bit, and playing catch-up. We have been there for maybe a half hour at the time. I'm sitting on the couch facing the fireplace. This is an open concept room, so there is a table and chairs set against the back of the couch where his grandpa is holding court. Everyone is apparently discussing my career behind me at the table. I work for a newly legal/slightly still illegal industry, so people think it's exciting. His grandpa grabs my ponytail from behind and starts jerking my head back and forth very forcefully while telling a few people about my job. I am panicking. I am completely still thanks to my awesome fight, flight, or freeze response. My partner laughs until I grab his leg and panic yell at him to get him off of me. He grabs his grandpa's hand and pries his claws out of my hair. I'm destroyed. The connotations of grabbing a woman by her hair are extremely rapey, and I've had issues with another male family member groping me, so I start to shut down. This man just put his hands on me in an open and clearly negative way. I'm red, rashy, and quietly crying while also too frozen/shocked to move. My partner asks me if I'm okay, but I'm too upset to respond besides saying fine and ducking my head. Later in the car, he yells at me because it wasn't really assault. I'm making too big a deal about it. It's just how his grandpa is. Then he yells at me asking what I expected him to do. Then he asks if I want to press charges. How do I tell him that the thought of ever seeing his grandpa again makes me want to puke? That he left me feeling vulnerable and made it worse by negating my feelings as I'm sobbing in the car. We had to go back to that house for family pictures later that night, and I cried the whole way over because I kept having panic attacks about his grandpa cornering me in the bathroom or something. This is a big deal, right? I'm so hurt and uncomfortable, and my heart is racing just typing this all out. I literally just started crying again.